Hello, and welcome to Coffee with Coach. St. Andrews by the Sea. March is Women's History Month, so I've invited several women to join with me and Coffee with Coach to talk about how things are going for women in ministry today. Not so much about the history of the women's movement, but rather, how are things going for women who are making history today? I think you'll find a lot to learn from these amazing women. I am pleased to share them with you on Coffee with Coach. I have 3 goals for these videos: to help you become a better pastor and leader, to save you time and money, and to help educate, energize, and motivate you to energize and motivate your church. I am really happy to welcome Harriet Bryan to Coffee with Coach. Harriet is a United Methodist pastor, currently serving as the senior pastor of the Madison Street United Methodist Church in Clarksville, Tennessee. A native of Tennessee, she graduated with honors from the University of Mississippi and from the Divinity School of Duke University. She received a diploma in divinity from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. Harriet served as an associate in Raleigh, North Carolina before coming back to Tennessee, where she served Aaron, Salem UMC, and Clarksville. She was the first woman to serve as the Nashville District Superintendent, and in 2017 she was appointed to Madison Street. Harriet has served on church committees at the district, conference, jurisdiction, and general church level. Harriet is married to Dwayne Harris. They reside in Clarksville, Tennessee with their 2 dogs and 2 cats. I think you'll enjoy our conversation today with Harriet Bryan. Harriet Bryan, welcome to Coffee with Coach. It is so good to have you, and it's so good to see you again after all these years. So tell me, well, first of all, tell me about your church.
I serve at Madison Street United Methodist Church in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is northwest of Nashville. I'm close to Kentucky, and Clarksville is both a university town and a military town. 80% of Fort Campbell, Kentucky is actually in Tennessee. The post office is in Kentucky, which is why it's called Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Don't know that you want to know that, but anyway, I serve at a very traditional downtown church, a cathedral-style church. I'm very blessed to be there.
So my coffee cup today
Yes.
is from St. Andrews by the Sea United Methodist Church, and I got it because I know you went to St. Andrews for your graduate work in
Yes,
Scotland.
I did.
And so I think I've always said St. Andrews by the Sea in San Clemente was the only church in the country named after a golf course.
I've always said if I had a patron saint, it would be St. Andrew, because not only did I spend that year in St. Andrews, Scotland, but my first appointment in the North Carolina Conference was at St. Andrew United Methodist Church.
Oh, really?
And I did the very unusual thing of beginning as an associate at St. Andrew, going to St. Andrews in Scotland, and coming back to be the associate again at St. Andrews in North Carolina. So
They wanted more of you.
they did.
That's a compliment. There you go.
So
What inspired you to enter the ministry, Harriet?
I'm one of those people who heard an outer call before I ever heard an inner call to ministry. And I was blessed to have people who kept identifying a call to ministry for me, saying, you should consider going to ministry. Have you ever thought about going into ministry? I think you would be a gifted pastor. And this was really hard for me to take in initially, because I grew up in a county seat church in Tennessee, and it was the place where pastors always came before they retired. It was the final appointment prior to retirement. And so every pastor I had ever seen was a man who either had white hair or was bald. I had no frame of reference for a female pastor. So
Here I am.
here you are.
I got the white hair and I'm bald, both.
So I was like, ministry? Can women be pastors? Um, so it was people encouraging me. But I will say that even with their encouragement, when I first enrolled in divinity school, I was so unsure of having a call to ministry that I originally enrolled in a degree that Duke no longer offers of the Masters of Religious Education because I thought I would be a religious educator instead of a pastor because women can't be pastors, can they? So
Yeah. Yep. So, at what point did you decide to switch from an MRE to an MDiv?
my first year in divinity school, I did a field education placement at a church outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And my very first Sunday, I was met at the door by a couple in their 80s who said, "Well, welcome, but we just want you to know women shouldn't be pastors." And I said, "Well, thank you. Nice to meet you too. Um, I'm happy to tell you I don't intend to be a pastor." And over the course of the summer in my time there, they came to me my final Sunday and said, "Harriet, we want you to know that we still don't think that women should be pastors. However, it's okay for you to be one." And
I'm
not
not
long,
sure what that says.
but that coupled with understanding the theology behind why United Methodist ordained women and what our underpinning for that was, led me to decide that if God would open doors, I'd walk through them and just see what happened. So, and that it would be, well, that is a partial answer, Steve. The second part of that answer that I should give you to be faithful, that I say, is that God can use anything, including our pride. Because somewhere along the way, I had a conversation. I finally met a female pastor, they did exist, who told me that it was fine for me to not go into ordained ministry, but as if I did not have a master's in divinity, every male pastor with whom I ever worked would think that he could talk down to me. And I thought, I'm not going to let.
So, I'm going to go get my doctorate in Scotland. Nobody's going to talk down to me.
I'm a younger sister who always had to assert her place.
Oh,
With an
that, that,
outstanding older sibling. But anyway,
that would be my
but,
daughter, Lisa. Yeah. Okay.
but those two factors together, the pride and the couple changing their mind, made me think, well, we'll just see what God does with this. So,
And God did well. Did you anticipate difficulty in the process?
know that I really did, and perhaps some of that was being naive and not knowing. But for me, it really has always been walking through each door as it has opened. Um, so I've never had a roadmap or an expectation. Never really known um, what was coming next. So,
But you did anticipate that senior pastors could talk down to you.
well, yes, I did, because I was told that that could happen.
Okay.
So,
What difficulty did you encounter that you had not anticipated?
um, the difficulties that I encountered occurred when I was actually appointed to serve churches. Um, so, my first appointment back in my home state of Tennessee, I was the second female pastor. And I mean, it is so much easier, even in 1999 or 2007, or 2017 when I have begun new appointments in local churches. Twice I've been the second female pastor, once I've been the first female pastor. So even in this day and age, it is so much easier to be the second female pastor than the first female pastor because of the opposition to having a female pastor come and serve. The unknown quality, and then the um, belief that it is unbiblical to have female pastors. That is the prevalent mindset in the part of the country in which I live. So I always tell female pastors, know that you're not going to persuade someone you're not going to argue them into seeing your perspective, but write out the biblical verses that you understand to support the ordination of women, keep it on your computer, and have it available to send to every person in your church who will come to you and say, my brother doesn't understand, my sister-in-law doesn't understand, my cousin doesn't understand. So you can at least say, well, this is the rationale. You don't have to agree with it, but we do have a rationale. And I've always had to go into Sunday school classes and explain it. I always tell all clergy, but especially women, tell your call story your first Sunday, because people need to know and believe that you have a calling from God to do what you're doing. But the opposition has been from staff parish committees who vote and say, we don't want to accept that appointment. We don't think that will work. People that walk out the door and never give you a chance before the first time you preach based on gender. So those are difficulties that I really did not anticipate and for which I was not prepared. So that it is easier, and I'm repeating myself, I know this, but it really is easier to be the second female pastor, because at that point, people have made peace with the folks who've left, and they're not trying to get them back, or people come back because they need the pastor to do their funeral or the funeral of a loved one. So
you can always just love them back in.
Try.
What do you wish your male colleagues knew or understood about being a woman in ministry?
Conversations that I continuously have with friends of mine, they're just interesting to me, is how much slower I am to move and to act, particularly in a new appointment, than my male colleagues are, because I know that I have to establish relational equity. I think that's good for any pastor going into an appointment, to establish relational equity, but I know I have to have a higher investment before I can act, because an assertive woman is not thought of in the same terms, generally speaking, as an assertive man who's perceived as a leader. And anyway, I'll stop there. But that's because my friends are often just perplexed of, Harriet, you know where you want to go, you see you've got the vision, why aren't you acting on it yet? I'm like, because the time's not right.
Okay, still paving the road.
I was told in one appointment that the reason that I was a success where another female pastor had not been was because I smiled.
Keep smiling. Okay, I'll move on.
Okay.
Have you had encounters as a woman in ministry that you don't think your male counterparts have had? And can you share some of those?
I have had inappropriate sexual comments made to me. I've had inappropriate sexual
wait.
advances made to me. So invitations to sit in someone's lap in a meeting, those sorts of things. You don't say that. You don't say that one-on-one, but you don't say that in front of others.
I've never had a woman ask me to sit in her lap.
You haven't?
No,
Steve.
no, I weigh 250 pounds. Nobody's.
And tell you how much and tell you how much she would enjoy it if you would do that?
No. Mm-mm. Have there been hurdles that you felt you had to clear that your male counterparts may not have had to? If so, can you share some of those experiences?
My very first position at a church was not an appointed position. It was as a hire as a youth director when I was in college. But I still remember the conversation that I had with the pastor before I showed up for the interview, in which he said to me very clearly, um, before you drive here, which is an hour away, I think it is only fair to let you know that we would prefer to have someone who is older, who has experience. Well, that's fair. We would prefer to have someone who is married and has some stability. Well, okay. And it goes without saying we prefer to have a man. But if you are still interested in the position, you can come down and interview. Um,
Wow. Wow.
so three,
Did did you drive?
I did, and they
Did,
hired me on the spot. I was the 12th person they'd interviewed over the course of 9 months, and I'm the person that that God sent to them that they ended up hiring. But
well, intelligence and competence does sometimes win out.
so
Can you be can you think of other hurdles that you have had to clear that men don't have to?
um, I think every woman in ministry has to do an above average or an exceptional job in ministry or the thing. And I know that technically the United Methodist Church has ordained women since 1956. Um, but I know that there are a number of churches, particularly in my conference, who have yet to have a female pastor. And so if there is a negative experience with a female pastor, the assumption is female pastors are no good. It's not. Harriet was ineffective. It's female pastors can't preach or can't do whatever. And so I think that is an added, I don't know if this is necessarily a hurdle, but it's an added um, burden that many of us feel that um, we
I
have
mean,
to.
how do you jump over the hurdle of being a female pastor?
Right. It is
It's
what it is.
you're going to be female and you're going to be a pastor, and it's not something you can really leave behind. It's a hurdle you have to pick up and run with.
As one of my early mentors said when I was bemoaning being a young woman, he was like, well, you will get older, but you're not going to change your genders. um,
Oh, 7. What has been the most challenging aspect of your ministry in general? And then what has been the most challenging part of your ministry as a woman?
for me, it is spending enough time in relationship with people and with God to have a sense of vision of how do we move forward. Where is God calling us? What is the next faithful step? One of the things that I know about myself is that I know what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are, and that I need to work with a team who can help craft and develop a vision. And early on, I felt all the pressure that was my job. I mean, that's what the church told me. It's your job to come up
Mm.
with the vision. And for me to say, but God didn't tell me anything. I mean, I don't know what we're supposed to do. But that to learn that about myself, and then to figure out how to cultivate and listen and raise up the right people to be around the table to have those conversations has been for me personally. Um, and then the other thing that I think is true for so many of us who are clergy, which is what I so in our earlier conversation so respect, admire, and appreciate that it appears that you and your wife were able to do, is to find that balance so that you avoid burnout and that ministry is a joy, and that um, one of the sayings that I frequently tell younger pastors, because I believe it to be true, is there are two sayings that a spiritual director told me. Um, the church will reward you for behavior that will ultimately kill you. And the second is that the shepherd who isn't fed eats the sheep. Um, and,
Wow. Okay.
and I have a tendency to overwork. Um, so anyway, finding that balance.
And as a
But
woman in general.
I have always, after the initial hurdle of "we don't want you," um, I have always been really blessed, and I think I'm grateful that God has gifted me with relational skills, because that's what people expect from a female pastor, um, from a woman. Uh, But but to be able to build a rapport that I have not sensed as many hurdles after the initial hurdle, based upon gender. I mean,
Hmm.
there are always the odd cases of, going to visit somebody in the hospital and the son-in-law walks out of the room because it's not appropriate for a female pastor to pray. I mean, something like that, um, in my setting. But um, but the family is, mortified and embarrassed and want to affirm me. And like, it's okay. That's his issue. It's not yours. It's not mine.
Hmm.
So,
Number 8. I love this one. What would you say to your younger self to encourage her as she considers the ministry or takes her first steps into ministry?
I would really tell myself it will be okay. God is faithful. um, I often say that if anyone were ever, and if I had a choice, I would burn my journals, so nobody could ever read them. Um, but if anybody were ever to read them, I would hope that they would look at the dates, so they wouldn't think that I was the most doubt-filled um, pastor ever to respond to a call to ministry, and to know that those are just stops along the journey where I haven't seen what God is going to do next. Um, but I've had so many questions like, how's this going to work out? Is this going to work out? What? And to say it, God is faithful, and it will work out. One of the things with my background is um, my hearing a call to ministry came as a complete shock and surprise to my family. Um, there are no clergy in my family, and so people who attend church, but no clergy, and so a lot of family pushback, from the
Really?
perspective of, you could do anything. Why do you want to throw your life away? Um, to My dad didn't speak to me for several months, because he was so disappointed in my decision, until I went to him and said, "You don't have to like it, but I'm your baby girl and you have to talk to me. There's That's non-negotiable." But it just seemed so hard initially of how's this going to work, or again going into that appointment where I knew they didn't want me, and the district superintendent said, "Oh, they're ready for you. And then, I go in and I pull out the staff parish records and I'm like, well, look, they voted unanimously not to accept a female pastor. And here I am. My gut instinct was right.
You mean a DS lied to you?
Yes.
That's never happened before.
It was a
Ever.
one-off. I'm sure of it.
I'm sure of it. Yeah. So you would say to your younger self, it's okay. It'll be all right. God is
Trust.
faithful.
Just trust.
So when God kicks you off the high board, God knows that you're going to survive when you hit the water.
Yes.
Doesn't mean it won't hurt when you hit the water, but you will survive. Okay. It is difficult to separate different parts of ourselves, but would you share how you think your sexuality, race, class, or other aspects of your identity have impacted your abilities in ministry?
One of the things that I've become just crystal clear about is that we need both men and women in ministry, because of the ability to connect with others. And I'm not saying that a female pastor cannot effectively pastor a male parishioner or a male pastor cannot effectively pastor a female parishioner. And yet, I guess I'm saying to a degree, yes, that is true. I mean, you can't make blanket statements. I know that. But I consistently have been grateful for opportunities that I've had to be a part of healing with women who have carried burdens for years that they've never felt they could talk to a male pastor about. And I've had opportunities when I've been incorporated, so to speak, not recently, but early in my ministry, where there's a division. The women wash the dishes after the meal while the men go off and do whatever.
Wait a minute. Washing dishes was always my job.
They and so to be able to be a part of those conversations that have happened, but sort of organically, and I've thought, wow, not many men would have this opportunity. But I do specifically think of a woman in one appointment to whom I got close who had been absolutely devastated by a divorce 30 years prior and had never processed the grief, because the male pastors she'd had been very dismissive of it. Yeah, it happened, go on.
Wow.
And I know, I mean, that would not always be the case, but I mean, I sat with her, we looked at the wedding albums, she cried. I mean, anyway. So that has been a place for me. I am keenly aware also of that just as churches have been resistant to having a female pastor, that if I were not a white female pastor, there would be much more resistance.
Oh my. Okay. In Tennessee.
In Tennessee, I believe that wholeheartedly. And class, I'm sure has also helped. I have often thought when I have gone into churches that if I were not the pastor, I would not find entry nearly as easy than if I were someone seeking a church home, and that I wouldn't necessarily have as much of a voice at a table if I were not the pastor.
Now, I'm going to push you on that question, your
Okay.
answer. One of the things when I was a senior pastor and I got to have associate pastors, if I got a choice, I would always ask for a female associate pastor.
Mhm.
Who would you pick for your associate pastors?
Well, I'm a senior pastor now, and I have not. So we have. I've been at the church. I'm in my fourth year. Um, an associate pastor who is a deacon who's been there for 18 years, um, and so we have that built-in balance that I have the good fortune of working with a very um, uber talented, one might say, male associate pastor. Um, and then there is another pastor who's a part time pastor for congregational care. And for that, um, gender would be irrelevant to me to have um, somebody who had good listening skills would be what I would be looking for in that role. It
Mm-hmm.
does happen
So
to
you
be.
do have that balance on your staff.
Yes.
Cool.
Mhm.
All right.
And always
Uh,
try to have balance. I mean, with lay liturgists and others. I mean, leading
mhm.
worship to make sure that we have a balance.
What can other colleagues, including men, do to be better allies or support to women in ministry?
Again, I feel that I have been extremely blessed with colleagues and friends who have been incredibly supportive, invited me to be a part of covenant groups. I think any opportunity that uh, a male pastor has to speak um, encouragingly about women in ministry, to be positive, is affirming. I have appreciated opportunities that I have been given to preach in churches who haven't been exposed to a female pastor. They go, oh, wow, look, she can string two sentences together. Isn't that amazing? Um, but and I make light, but I think that those really are ways, and particularly in paving the way for when there's a pastoral transition, to affirm and say this is um, positive. These are the gifts that this person brings, and um, to do the groundwork for. Again, this may be my setting more in the South, but to say, this is the biblical rationale, people, we have one um, for this decision that we have made as a denomination to have female clergy. So,
Okay.
and the really big thing,
Well, I want to know the really big thing.
talk less when there are women in the room. There are always women who want to speak,
Yes.
who have a difficult time getting a word in edgewise.
Yes.
So take a breath and see if a woman will speak. Because everybody's not going to be as assertive as I am.
All righty. Anything else that you would add to what we've said? Anything that
No,
stands
thank
out?
you. I'm so again, it may only be 2 or 3 people who will watch this, and that's fine. But I was really glad for the opportunity to connect. I still remember when we met, and that sense of connection. I'm glad I get to call you a colleague. Thank you for this gift and this time.
It is my pleasure. It is my pleasure. We'll have to connect again on something else.
Sounds good.
All righty.
Okay.
Harriet,
Thank you,
be
Steve.
good. God bless you.
You too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Harriet Bryan. Next week, our guest will be Bishop Karen Oliveto of the Mountain Sky Annual Conference. I know you will want to remember to check in for that. So please consider clicking the subscribe button down there or my smiling face up here And if you like these videos, give me the thumbs up down there with a happy click on that thumb up. See you next week on Coffee with Coach.